So I'm very excited to have Samir here. Before we get into the background questions, I want to give you 10 seconds to explain your current startup, Nia Health, and then we'll go back all the way back to your starting your career. So can you explain what your current startup is, just for people that don't know it?
Yeah, you bet. So Nia Health is Canada's first emerging proactive end-to-end health partner. So we'll look at a bunch of different advanced diagnostics, whether it be blood work, VO2 max, DEXA, gut microbiome, you name it, all based on the latest evidence. And we'll tell you what your biggest risks to health span are, what you can do to get in front of it, and provide you with clinician consultation, wearable integration to truly be your partner on your healthcare journey. So for any of you who follow Peter Attia, Andrew Huberman, any of these thought leaders that have emerged, we're operationalizing Medicine 3.0 in a Canadian context.
Excellent. So this is not your first startup. Let's rewind a few years. How'd you even get interested in entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so my journey was interesting because I come from an immigrant family, and so the par for the course in immigrant families to be a doctor, engineer, or lawyer. East Indian family, for those who come from the same heritage or similar. And they didn't understand what entrepreneurship was. So they wanted me to be one of those three things when I was in undergrad. It took me a while to convince them that being an investment banker was a good thing to do, or potentially a good thing to do, prestigious, whatever it might be. And I actually, during my undergrad degree, had summered at Morgan Stanley in investment banking. So I thought I'd made it, right? It's a big deal to get an internship and be able to be a part of that world. And I realized I was a kid who was 3 weeks in. I basically said to my managing director, and this was when I was 20 years old, when everybody else was trying to compete to get the full-time offer, because no matter whether you liked investment banking or not, and Alex would know this being at McKinsey, in his background, that you did whatever it took to get that full-time offer. But I went in 3 weeks into my internship and I said to the MD, man, this is not for me. So my parents really couldn't understand what it was that Samir was really after here. And frankly, at that stage in life, I myself didn't really know. Now, a number of you might be familiar with Next Canada, the Next 36, et cetera. I consider myself blessed to have been a part of the Next 36, and that was back in 2014, so 11 years ago now, where it wasn't as ubiquitous to imagine entrepreneurship as a viable path, career-wise, coming out of university or what have you, and especially if you didn't come from an entrepreneurial family. It was a path that was unknown, and so for me, Next Canada, Next 36 was a pivotal moment and a completely transformative moment in my life, because it showed me that, hey, you can actually create something not knowing anything about an industry and go after a problem and solve it. And so, Next 36 and Next Canada were the spawning of my first business, was SensaSure. We built a sensing solution for incontinence management in nursing homes. So it was a sensor, reusable sensor you put on the outside of adult incontinence products or in adult diapers, tracked if elders soil themselves, and wirelessly told them if they need to be changed, told nursing staff if they need to be changed in nursing homes. And my claim to fame on that journey was I physically lived out of 3 different nursing homes for 12 months across North America while I was building that out. So it was an incredible journey that kick-started the journey.
So a couple follow-up questions. First of all, like, you have a very similar background to you, immigrant family. I worked in investment banking to start with. Did your parents understand what investment banking is, or did they think you were like in a boiler room?
I thought I was a teller.
Yeah. Or boiler room, right? Yeah.
That's why I said it took me a whole God knows how many years to explain that I wasn't. And then they thought, oh wow, like this guy could maybe be on CNBC one day, and this is a big deal. But eventually, and then to tell them after the fact, after you go through all the trials and tribulations that it still takes to get into that, whether it be investment banking or consulting, that this is not the path for you, and you're going to get into the diaper business, right?
Well,
like,
so
what's that all about?
Let's talk about that. So your Next 36. So for people who don't understand, can you explain how the Next 36 program works, and then can you tell me how you and your co-founder decided we're going to go into the adult diaper business?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, so the Next Canada, it's an not-for-profit organization here based out of Toronto. And at that point in time, 10 years ago or so, it was a lot about picking 36 graduating undergrads from across the country, put you into teams, give you seed funding to start up a tech venture. And so it gives you the mentorship, the seed funding, the whole framework, of which, when I say that today in 2025, it sounds like kind of innocuous. Like it's just like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of programs that do that. But 10, 11 years ago, it was one of the pioneers, at least in this country, of doing that. And I owe a lot of everything that I've been able to achieve personally, and the spawning of our, even my second business to what was done at Next 36 and the path that they set us on. So yeah, that's a little bit about.
So that's Next 36, and then how do you guys decide to do adult
diapers? So I kind of walked out of investment banking saying, hey, you know what? I'd love to do something and spend 80 hours or 100 hours a week working on something that made a difference in the world. And if you find a problem in healthcare, you're probably doing something meaningful for people. And so in some ways, it was as simple and as complicated as that as a starting point, where it said, hey, let's find a problem in healthcare to solve. And if you do that, you're probably going to do something good for the world. And elder care in general, especially 11 years ago, now it's getting a little bit hotter, but 11 years ago, it was a very overlooked space, right? It was like, it's elder care, it's elders, like not a lot of innovation happening in the space. And so for me, coming in fresh and saying, hey, here's an opportunity to get your teeth around, it was a great industry to try to find problems to solve in. And we didn't call it customer discovery maybe even back then, but I hate even using language like that. It makes me sound old. But anyway, the thing is that like we didn't actually use that term of customer discovery at that point. It was that you wanted to understand a customer problem. And so we talked to a ton of different stakeholders in the space, geriatricians, care home administrators, nursing staff, and said, where does your day suck? As a 20-year-old, I didn't even know what incontinence meant at that stage of life. And so, yeah, to me, it was an exercise in understanding your customer right from the start, even having no knowledge of the problem.
And so what happened with that first company?
So we ended up selling it. For those of you who are familiar with Essity, it's a Swedish-based brand that owns the Tenna brand, Torque products, which many of you might be familiar with if you go to Starbucks and you're sitting in the washroom or whatever, and you're looking at your toilet paper, et cetera. So it's a massive paper and one of the largest adult diaper manufacturers in the world, based out of Sweden. So we sold that in 2016. I worked with them for a few years, and then several years later, ended up starting Nia Health.
Okay, one last question, and I want to hear about how you got from there to Nia Health. At that point, what did your parents say?
I think the final vindication point is little East Indian boy who took the path less traveled was that when you sold the company, the parents finally thought it was a good idea.
So must have been easy. You have one win under your belt. You've done your time with the choir. So imagine next day you walked out and started Nia Health.
Yeah, and see the interesting part of that presumed narrative, which is actually how I presumed it would go, is that it was nothing like that. Because I think when you decide you're going to sell the first business, you think, hey, it's going to be so much easier the next time, right? You've learned a bunch of stuff, you got a bunch of relationships, you just know more. You know how to do diligence, right? When you're 20 years old, you barely know how to spell diligence. No disrespect to the folks who are 20 years old in the audience, but to me, it's a totally different world. And when the stark reality of that post-acquisition phase was that you found it much harder to actually get started on the next horse, because you knew how hard it was going to be. Commitment actually took a lot more before you got into it, because it was like, hey, my expectations for success are much higher. I know how to do diligence, and I think like when you know how to do diligence, it becomes this private equity or kind of like a consulting exercise where you say, here's the market, here's all the risks and inevitably, whenever you do diligence on an idea, you find out all the reasons why it's not going to work. So to kind of get back into the room and say, I'm going to go all in on something and spend 100 hours a week or 80 hours, whatever it is, to prosecute that idea, it's a big leap, and it's a bigger leap the second time around than it was the first. So I ended up actually looking back on my early 20s and saying, man, it was a blissful period of life in a sense, because you could be blissfully ignorant, and you could just go after problems, and whatever the obstacles that emerge, you would just figure out a way to get past them. But it becomes actually counterintuitively, perhaps, harder as you get older. It was my reflection.
And so, how did you decide Nia Health was the right one, and how long did it take you to find Nia Health?
So the first answer is it took me 4 years to figure out what the next business is, and I think my reflection on that is you get a bunch of advisors and mentors and former investors who you think are going to be advantageous to you figuring out your next gig, but the reality is they can also count against you, because there's like 10,000 more opinions in the room about why something will or will not work that you never had to contend with in your earlier days. And so to me, it was an excruciating journey, actually, of 4 years, trying different ideas. I must have tried 50 plus different ideas, written blog posts about it, tried to use Steve Blank's frameworks of how to come up with startup ideas and vet different startup ideas, diligence them to varying degrees, anywhere from a few days to, months of your time trying to figure out, is this the right next thing to commit yourself to? And I would say to you another thing just about myself, which might not apply to everybody in the room, which is if you have tasted what it tastes like to be mission-driven and to actually make a real dent in the universe in a visceral way. So, for example, I literally, in my first company, helped people not sit in soiled diapers for hours on end, right? And not develop those skin infections and not develop the kind of resulting consequences of sitting in soiled diapers. I mean, once you've done something as visceral as that, how do you compare impact? Like, how do you think about what's worth sacrificing for, what's worth working really, really hard for? And so to me, I found this to be a really challenging part of getting on to the next journey, was what's worthy enough to actually devote your efforts to.
So was like health span something you were interested in? Like what led you to finding, trying to solve this problem, and what gave you the conviction to launch?
So, I mean, again, living at nursing homes for 12 months, I said one of the calls to action that would be worthy is how do we keep people out of nursing homes in the first place? And how do we keep people healthy for as long as possible so that when you think about living a 100-year life, which, by the way, a baby born today has a greater than 50% chance of living to be 100. So this is going to be the new norm. But when a lot of us in the audience here might think about living to be 100, you don't necessarily think about greatness, about vitality, about spending time with one's future grandchildren. You think about kind of this decrepit decline in your last decade. And so to me, a couple of things happened. One is my personal journey from Nia showed me that, hey, this is a cause worth going after. I think secondly, I mentioned it earlier, these thought leaders, whether it be Peter Attia, Huberman, et cetera, they've done a great service for the world in educating us as consumers about what is actually possible based on the latest science in terms of actually managing your health and being more proactive about your health, and not just being subject to what currently exists in public systems across the world today. And then, thirdly, I would say to you that beyond all that, it was about having the right people on your side. So Boris Wirtz at Version 1 Ventures. But he was one of the people in my life that I always went to when vetting any idea. And so for 4 years, I was trying different things, and he would always crap all over whatever idea was trying to pursue at that given point in time. But when it came to Nia, it was literally within a span of 20 to 30 minutes. He said, well, when are you raising funds? And I said, well, I was going to do X, Y, and Z, more diligence. And he said, well, you should just do it right now, and I'll be the first check. And so to me, that really created a spark and a completely different way of jumping in, having somebody who you really respect and count on back you, and be willing to go the distance with you. And he has done just that. He's world class. Can't say enough good things about Boris.
Well, Boris always tells you directly what he thinks. So when he's excited about something, he's not going to hide that either. So you're doing healthcare in Canada. I'm sure everyone here's complained about our system. The every province is different. There's a lot of worry about having too much privatized healthcare. So how do you tackle our healthcare system, or how do you offer healthcare or health without getting bogged down, but moving at startup speed here?
Yeah, so our big thing from the start has been a couple of points. One is that we always look at ourselves as a complementary actor to the public system. We know that private healthcare and privatization of healthcare it's a glaring issue that on a broad basis, Canadians, we've been very protective of our public health system, as we should be, right? Because it's something that has allowed us to deal with acute illness in a way in which in other countries in the West have not been able to do. And so we should be proud of some of the outcomes, and many of the outcomes that we've been able to achieve in a publicly funded system. But that notwithstanding, we see a bunch of issues where if we want to move to the next level, where we want to offer proactive health so that you get in front of disease before it occurs, that's just not what our system nor many other systems in the West have been set up to do. And so to us, from the start, we've designed all of our products to be complementary to the public system. How do we make sure that if you do need access to the public system after having gone through some of our testing, that you're able to, as easily as possible, get that, right? And so we built that into the product. That's been part of our product development ethos from the start and will continue to be in the future. The second part is that we have a deep respect for clinicians. So whereas a number of our competitors in the US, those of you might be familiar with the space, they're basically trying to take the clinician out of the loop. We're betting fully on clinician in the loop, clinician first models. A clinician stands behind every test that we order, every test that we interpret, and it's something that we think leads, especially through our consultation process, to elevated health outcomes where people actually take action on and promotes behavior change.
And taking the approach you're doing, working with the system, working with clinicians, how do you deal with the differences between provinces, or are they just not that bad?
There are differences. There's significant differences between provinces, but at the same time, too, I think they all operate under this ethos driven by the Canada Health Act that says, hey, all Canadians deserve a right to, proper health care. It's just, I think in our minds, the definition of the best health care in the country is evolving over time, and we're trying to, be a part of the movement that leads the way to transforming the healthcare system so that we prevent disease and we get in front of it versus having to react to it after the fact, which I think everybody in the audience would agree, yeah, it'd be better to prevent it in the first place than react to it, but it's pretty challenging to actually operationalize in the current framework.
And so far with your experience, what's the most surprising thing about working with the healthcare or building a health tech company in Canada?
I think that the most surprising thing actually, and even comparing my experience from 10 years ago building a health tech company in Canada, is that there definitely is a much broader willingness to pay and desire to solve the problem for themselves on the part of Canadian consumers in healthcare than perhaps existed even a decade ago. To us, the driving factors behind this are, 80% of Canadians have a primary care provider, 20% don't, or if not higher than that. And secondly, coming after COVID, we're seeing a much more of an awareness of the potential limitations, as well as like the potential strengths of the Canadian system, but the limitations if they want to own their health and kind of deal with their healthcare in a different way than we've been brought up to do in Canada to date.
Interesting, because if we were doing this pre-COVID with a health tech company in Canada, usually the first advice I'd give a founder would be tackle the States first. Don't bother with Canada.
Yeah.
So what's a new updated piece of advice for a health tech entrepreneur?
I mean, I don't know if I want to give blanket ubiquitous advice, which is probably useless for a lot of people, but like to me, through our experience building Nia, being forced to actually consider the public system, being forced to consider an environment where it's not just about paying out of pocket and paying as much as humanly possible out of pocket and capturing as much revenue as possible from the richest. For us, it's also about accessibility as we've been building the company. We can't build a Model S Tesla type of company where you build the first product off of the wealthiest in society, and then you slowly but surely, step by step, build to these other models. In healthcare building in Canada, we have to think about accessibility as a major part of how we're building our product solution. We have to think about the other stakeholders in the system, and whether those be insurers, whether those be existing clinicians, and we have to build a product offering that actually serves those different stakeholders' needs. So to us, accessibility is one of the driving forces of the company, and it's something that I think is distinctly Canadian. It's something that we pride ourselves, like, everyone should have access to the best healthcare, and we're trying to pave the way to do that. Ideally, government would have paid for this from the start, but we know that's not possible, so we're creating the evidence and we're creating the movement from the fringes to be able to actually move into the mainstream.
So no $30,000 annual plan coming out soon.
Yeah, no $30,000 annual plan. Maybe for you.
Damn it. Yeah. Well, I'll just put on Jason's credit card. You just recently announced your recent round. Can you tell everyone here about the round?
Yeah, so this is actually pretty special because we didn't even have a deck as part of the seed round. So we've only been around for 20 months as a company. We've raised over $8 million. So Version 1 Ventures was our lead in our pre-seed. Golden Ventures was our lead in our seed round. And what was special about this round was that Matt Golden of Golden Ventures was a customer of ours from the very start of the company. And so he had kind of seen the evolution of the product right from the start and preempted the round. And from the time that he said, hey, we're super interested in exploring investment and leading your seed round, it basically took 3 weeks, and we were oversubscribed and still have no deck. So when people ask us, can we see the investor deck you use, we still don't have one.
Did he come with terms, or did you propose the terms?
He came with, they come with terms, and then you propose different terms.
Okay.
And you somehow align on something that you both live with.
You heard at the beginning, many founders in open mic talked about raising soon. Some other people doing the demo day talked about raising. So what's your must do to get in a situation like that? And what's your must avoid to avoid having problems?
I mean, from our perspective, there's a lot of hype in our space. Broadly speaking, if we took a global perspective, there's companies in the US that have raised significantly more than we have, that started earlier than we have. They've got celebrity physicians backing them. They've got, a whole bunch of things that I would equate to, I would wrap around in this term of hype, right? We've always stayed feet to the ground, quintessentially Canadian, we'd like to say, right? Like, we do the work, we show the growth, 25% month over month, and we deliver a great product experience that changes lives. And to us, those are the proof points that matter on a day-to-day basis. And when you're a customer of Nia's, I think that our customer base would share the same viewpoint. And so to us, it's avoiding the hype, focusing on the first principles of build a great product, great team, and hopefully the growth is something that puts you in a position where you can be
build a strong company with good values and good product.
There you go.
Yeah, but what shouldn't you do? Except the opposite of that. But is there anything that will kill a fundraise that you can tell people to avoid?
I don't know. Honestly, to be honest, it's like we had customers who love what we did, and all the way through. Even Boris, like the first conversation, we didn't run a process on the first pre-seed. It's like you pursue things honestly. You got founder market fit, where the person who they're backing and the team that they're backing is one that's worthy of the next kind of round.
Well, what's interesting with Boris, he also write, I invest in future waves, right?
Yeah.
And I think good thing here is HealthSpan is something that he was definitely interested in. He knew you, so I think that helped. But what's more impressive, than Boris is always impressive, but the round you do with Golden is, to preempt and do it in 3 weeks. So you're now at growing very quickly. You're well funded. So we're going to sit back down here in 5 years or 7 years. How will Nia be different? What's the future hold?
Our current trajectory and our current focus is to win Canada quickly. There's not that much competition in this country for building in this proactive health space. So to us, it's all about spreading what we've built to as many Canadians as possible. We're looking at working with insurers, government, et cetera, to bring this out to millions. But ultimately, we've had a bunch of validation that compared to our US-based competitors, we have created a much better product offering already. So we're going to continue to double down on that and then give ourselves a shot at competing globally.
So let me reword on what I said. What does success look like for you? How are you going to measure success if we're, again, sitting down here in 5, 10 years?
Yeah. So to me, it's millions of people using Nia. Every Canadian should know what Nia Health is, because we're providing the pathway through which anybody, no matter what their income level, no matter what demographic they come from, should be able to own their own health in a way in which this is not possible today in the health system. And so to us, success is how do we make this thing something that every single Canadian knows in 5 years, and ideally globally, we become a force that's just not just a cute little Canadian company, something that everybody globally also appreciates.
So can I get a round of applause? I'm going to open up to questions. Okay, so I think we already have some questions up here.
Hi, great presentation. Thank you for that. Very engaging. I have 2 questions. For the first company, were you building it to sell? And is that the viewpoint you take with Nia Health as well? And the second is, I find that you were very articulate in the way you communicated. So who are some writers and communicators that you've admired?
On the first question, no. I've even on the first company never built to sell. Like, that's not the reason. Like, you can't get up in the morning and get the team up in the morning to live at nursing homes. Like, there was one nursing home in the Bay Area. We literally living on air mattresses because they didn't even have enough rooms for the team to actually stay in. So we lived on air mattresses. You just don't do that if you're thinking about, I'm going to get a outcome out of this, or I'm going to get some sort of an exit. So the exit is less the focus. The bigger focus at all times is the mission, how big that opportunity could be, and how you can get past that, how you can get past any obstacles that emerge along the way. I forgot your second question, but what was it?
You're very articulate. What books do you read or recommend?
Oh man, right? You're great. My favorite book of all time, probably, that I reread on a yearly basis, is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. So yeah, to me that's I think everybody has to have a reason to get up in the morning, and being able to articulate to yourself why you're getting up, despite external considerations, is important. And especially during the 4 years of which I was in the quote unquote wilderness, that's something I always clung to.
I have a question. Congrats on all your success, Samir. My name is Ray, founder and CEO of Regimen. I'd love to know what your go-to clinician strategy was and how you scaled onboarding.
Yeah, so to us, we've done something a little bit different in the sense that we have bet on a nurse practitioner-driven model. So I bet that half the audience doesn't actually know what a nurse practitioner is. It's something I had to learn even at the start of this journey. But nurse practitioners, basically, they do their RN, a registered nurse kind of thing that most people would think about when they're nurses. And then they have to do a master's on top of that. So we had initially started with a physician-driven model. We have shifted over time, in just a short period of time, 20 months, to a nurse practitioner-driven model. And it's a super interesting one, because what we discovered on a first principles basis is if you can find the clinicians, these nurse practitioners that are the top 1%, it means that, number one, they're medically rigorous. Like, when they don't know something, they'll go to the literature, just like any physician worth their salt would. But the second piece of it is that they're actually trained in the nursing background. And so that means that they're looking at a person holistically. So from a prevention perspective, it's immensely valuable, because they're both fluent in medicine as well as people, right? And so to us, that's a huge competitive differentiator, especially compared to our competitors in the US, where they're trying to take clinicians wholly out of the loop and only look at physicians as the means of which you can deliver great proactive health.
One more question?
One more
Do we have
question.
one last question?
One more at the back.
You'll have to keep it for later.
Samir, thank you very much for sharing tonight. I love what you shared earlier about, the fact that when you started your first company, right, you didn't even have an idea of all the roadblocks you're going to have along the journey, right? And kind of the innocence that you have as like, young entrepreneur. The question I have for you is, do you think knowing everything you knew after the exit, you would still start the same company? Or you would have done things differently? Because, entrepreneurs do need to have this kind of eager and like, no matter what's coming, you will just find a solution for it.
For the first company?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I think I've always operated on a regret minimization framework. So to me, the first company coming right out of undergrad at the age of 20, dipping your toe into something that you actually believe in, that's mission driven, that gets people excited around a cause that to me is worthy, that's something that it was an immensely important lesson for me to learn at the early age of 20, that's what you should spend your time doing, right? Because most people in the world, like we talk about a lot of different companies that exist today, and that you're spending 80 or 100 hours a week working for, and you don't have that same sense of satisfaction that win or lose, it was worth the effort. So to me, the thing was always win or lose, because there's a 90% chance of failure at any of these endeavors when you first start. It's got to be worth it. It's got to be worth the effort when you're in the arena, and whether you lose or you win, it's got to be worth it. So to me, that was like one of the biggest takeaways from the first journey. No regrets.
Pursue the purpose.
Yeah, you got to have a purpose. You got to have a purpose.
Cool.
Thank
Can I
you
get a
very
round
much.
of applause for Samir? Thank you.